Welcome back to this video, and in this part we are going to talk about color theory, and I'm going to walk you through ink blending on different types of paper using different types of inks like the dye inks and the oxide inks. So let's just jump right into the video. Welcome back to this segment where we are going to talk about color theory. And we all learn this in some shape or form in school, during our art classes, and also during our science classes, that the spectrum of light is actually split in 7 colors, right? The 7 colors of the rainbow, which we know as Roy G. Biv. And this is where the color theory actually comes in. And my mind was completely blown when I heard Gina of Gina K Designs talk about and explain color theory. That's when everything became crystal clear for me, because even though I was a photographer and I dealt with a lot of colors, always have to work with colors in photography and then retouching and design and everything, but still having to ink blend with colors and painting and things like that, that wasn't really something I did often. So let's cut to the chase. Let's look at the color theory as it would apply to ink blending, because not every ink will blend well with the other. And just so that we can avoid muddy colors, we have to be conscious about what colors we are mixing with what. So with the Roy G. Biv, this is red, orange, white, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. So let's start with the red. I'm just going to bring in my trusty shelf liner here so I can, or maybe I'll put it on this side so I can use this. Because I only have these 3 blending tools, I'm going to use them, and I have to change up the foam pads, and I'm using dome foams today because this is going to help with the ink blending a lot better. Now I'm going to just ink blend on hammer mill. This is hammer mill. This is the smooth cardstock, and I'm going to ink blend on the hammer mill. And what I'll do is I'm going to start putting down each ink side by side, and I will explain the color theory as we go along. So this was red. Let's go with orange, and I'm going to blend over. I'm going to overlap the colors here. So I'll start here and then move into the red. So this is the adjacent color. With the red, I'm getting a beautiful, vibrant, darker kind of an orange. This is quite a vibrant orange. Now, let's go with our yellow. As before, I'm going to start here and I am going to blend it into the orange. It looks pretty nice here as well. This is turning yellow and orange. Of course, this is also becoming a nice, a vibrant orange as well. Now, I need to change my foam. This is the orange. Let's try the green, and same thing here. Blend it into the yellow, and that looks like a nice, bright, happy green over there. Okay. Let's try the blue. Blend it into the green, and it's still a nice kind of a paler bluish green where it blends in. We can, of course, add a little bit more blue and blend it in over there, and that becomes a little bit more pronounced. But It's still looking good. The indigo. And if you're wondering what these colored stars are, like these are green and this is the red star on this, it's just that I kind of color code my ink pads so I know that they all belong to the same set. So I'm using most of these colors from the same set, the green set, but this one I didn't have a proper indigo, so I'm using it from the red set. Okay, now let's go in with the indigo. Does look a little bit purplish, but it still looks good, right? It almost kind of looks purple on the camera, but it's not really that purple. It's more blue. And let's actually change this one because there's something I want to show you after. And we'll use the purple here. And blend it into the indigo, and it still looks pretty good. Now begins the color theory. So when you use adjacent colors, as we can see, they all look pretty good with each other. When you use colors that are one away from the color on the spectrum, which is on Roy G. Biv, then it will still look good, because if we learned in art class, we know that red and yellow makes an orange. We know that red and blue could make a purple, but we know also that red and green can become muddy. So if you are working with the color adjacent to a certain color on the color wheel or the spectrum, or if you're working with a color one color away from the primary color, one of the colors on the spectrum, then we can still get good colors. But if we are picking one which is two away from, if we are picking red, for instance, and we are picking two away from red, which is green on the spectrum, green and red can become muddy. But what happens if we do red and purple? Because this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 colors away. So let's try. If we It does look a little bit brown, but this could also pass, like depending on how much you blend and how much purple you use, it could still pass as a kind of a really warm purple tone. It doesn't look as brown. Let's mix purple with the orange. Turns pretty brown over here. If I am missing a brown ink in my stash, I can very well use an orange and a yellow, an orange and a purple to create brown. Okay, what happens if I use it on yellow? Let's try that as well. It's still turning brown, right? Because remember, all of these colors are basically far removed from the purple. 1, 2, 3 colors removed from yellow. Right? If we take orange, it's 4 colors removed. So if we now try with the green, it's not brown, but it's kind of a weird kind of a purple, but maybe it can still work if we, for instance, if I just take a little bit of green and try to blend it over the purple. Right? But it's still it's either a muddy kind of a green, it's not vibrant at all, or it's a weird purple, right? Now let's try purple with the blue, because now we are getting closer to the purple, right? So if we try purple with the blue, and then we use a little bit more blue over the purple, I'm going to try and be careful not to it's actually creating almost a lilac kind of a shade over here, right? So not bad at all. Now, of course, it's all going to smooth out and lighten up a little bit once it starts to dry. But let's try purple again on this one a little bit. See, there is a distinct lilac kind of a shade in between, right? And of course, with the we've already blended into the indigo, and this will look really, really nice. Okay, and the moral of the story here is that if you use colors that are one removed, so red and orange, red and yellow, or red and orange, then you can still get by with a nice color. Let's actually try the red and the green. And we all know that yellow and blue makes green, right? So in between each of these colors lies the transitional color. Green and indigo will make some kind of a darker bluish green, like a teal kind of a thing. We know that this will work, but let's see if we use red and green. Let's go with green. And then I use the red. Put this back here, not to disturb the order. And now if I'm blending it nicely and I bring this in here, you see it's completely muddied up. Now you can't tell what color this is, except it's a brown, murky, muddy color. So all this to say, okay, since I do have the red out, let's try the red and the blue here. Of course, it kind of is a purplish kind of a thing, but depending on how much you blend, it could become a little bit muddy as well. You see, if I just left the blue with the red, I would have kind of gotten a prettier purple, but since I mixed in a little bit more red here, it's starting to muddy up. Because the blue is 1, 2, 3 times over from red. So I think you understand now that if you have to ink blend with different colors, then it's best to keep your Roy G. Biv spectrum of colors and then decide on either transitioning into the one that's adjacent to it on the spectrum or one over. Going over too much can actually create a problem. So if you want to blend really, really well, I suggest that one is that you stick to the color theory that I just discussed. And the other thing is make sure you have nice paper, because once you have a very good smooth paper, and Hammermill is really not that expensive. Nina Solar is a little bit more expensive than Hammermill, but if you have really good paper and you have a set of basic inks, I think you should be able to get by with beautiful ink blending. Now let's hop over to the next part of the video. So I'm going to use my Altenew inks. I have 4 colors: Ruby Red, Warm Sunshine, Iceberg, and Amethyst. And like I've already explained, it's using the Roy G. Biv theory. I'm basically going for red, yellow, blue, and violet. And with these 4 inks, you'll notice how we get a range of rainbow colors. And that is something that if you're just starting out, you don't really need to buy a whole lot of inks. Just get a few very, very basic inks like a red, a blue, a green, a yellow, a purple, a pink, And obviously a black will definitely help. So when you have like a few basic supplies, I don't use black a lot for my blending because I don't like that very dark look, but sometimes I will use it very lightly around the edges of a panel in case I need to darken it up a little bit. But I prefer a light, airy, bright colored panel, or colors in general. So I avoid using black on my in my ink blending. So let's just start. I will start with the red, and this is the Hammermill. This is the Hammermill cardstock, by the way, and I will start with the red. And what I do, this is something you may or may not have or use. This is a sticky mat that I got off of AliExpress, and what it helps me do is it helps me just stick the paper down like this, and then I come in, because this is a magnetic glass mat that I use, I can just put these magnets down, that way they don't keep shifting. And sometimes you might want to keep a border around the paper. So if you don't have a sticky mat, what you can do is you can tape the paper down. So maybe I can show you how you could do that really easily. And for that, I'm using some painter's tape. Got this from the dollar store, and I'm going to try and create like a really thin border, and it'll help if I can just line it up a little bit. So you tape off all 4 edges, and I try to keep the edges as uniform as I can. This seems a little bit thicker. Maybe I'll just smooth it. Otherwise it's going to bother me to no end. So I'll start here. Usually you'll find a lot of crafters telling you to first tap off the excess and then apply it to your paper, but honestly I don't do it because I find that a lot of ink goes to waste, and I'm a frugal crafter and I don't like to waste. So I will go in. This one became actually this is a really good example of if you go in too heavy in the beginning, and this is what's going to happen. You'll have dark patches and it's going to be splotchy. But if you go in very light-handed in the beginning, and then you start pressing down a little bit more, as you go along, as it progresses, it's not going to be that bad. But I can even this out a little bit more, and I'm going pretty light. Red is quite a heavy and intense color anyway, so I'm going pretty light right now. And then I have kind of gone through a quarter almost of the card panel, so now I'll go and apply more color and try to even out the blend it out. Since this is ink blending, I'm going to try and blend this out. I'm going pretty heavy-handed. It's always good to use a circular motion, and you can blend inwards and outwards, and that way you'll get like a more uniform finish. And also, this looks a little splotchy right now, but remember that the ink hasn't settled into the fibers of the paper yet, and this is a dye ink and it's still sitting on top, but once it dries up a little bit, it's going to smooth out a lot more. So let's go with the next color, and I'm going to use yellow. And because I don't want to get a lot of red onto my blender over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in from here this way. So what I'll do is I'll just turn my glass mat a little, and I'm going to go in from here. Okay, and then finally, of course, I will reach the red, but I wouldn't bring in all the red into the yellow already. I've actually taken it too far out over here. I forgot to do that now. What I do is I put like a pencil mark where I want the gradations to happen, rather the change of colors to happen. So that way I know I shouldn't go beyond that point. But I forgot to do it here. And that's why I'm kind of going right over where I shouldn't, where I need to leave room for my other two colors. Now this is where I need to blend this area. You see, this is a little patchy here. So this is where I'm going to go in, and I know I'm going to get some red. As you see, you know, the red is coming on right at the outset. So, but now we have to go in and blend it out. So I'll go in with the yellow and a little bit heavy here because I really want a nice gradation. And now you see when the yellow blends into the red, you see a nice patch of orange. So that's why I was saying that you don't need to have all the colors, because you can definitely blend and create newer colors, right? So if I go in and I just blend this out a little bit. So I'm getting a nice band of orange over here. Yeah, I'll even it out, and then I'm going to go back with the residual ink on my blender here, and I'll go in and blend that out again, because that will give me the nice smooth transition. And if I see that, you know, I do need a little bit of evening out over here, I might just go in a little bit here and just blend it out. That was almost too much. So I need to go in again with my yellow a little bit. And once I'm done blending like all the colors, I can always come back and I can do one more. So I'm going to remember Roy G. Vib, right? So I went with our red. I skipped orange because it created orange here because I used yellow. I skipped one, right? Yellow. I'm going to skip green, and I'm going to use blue because blue and yellow is going to create green over here. Blue, and then I'm going to skip indigo and then use violet. Okay, so this is a light blue, so I'm going to again start from here. I'm going to try and leave enough room for my purple, and you see I'm going in a little bit heavy with this because I know the blue is really light, and I do want to match the color intensity of the red and the yellow, because I should have actually chosen a slightly darker blue, and that would have helped, but it's okay. I can apply more. So now that I have my layer of blue, I'm going to go in now over the yellow. Again, I'm doing this to avoid contaminating my foam blender too much. And also remember, while I'm blending the blue, the yellow is drying up, so I'm going to get less contamination. gone in really heavy with the red, the blotchiness is almost gone. It's so much more uniform right now. This creates a nice bluish purple in this area. And you'll see it, especially once I come in with the blue, you'll see that happen. Maybe I could do a little bit more here. Oops. I know this is going to smooth out, but I do see some splotchy areas here. All right, so I'm going to leave this alone, and we are going to remove the tape for the reveal. And you see there's that first border. I'm going to reuse this tape because I'm going to show you another panel, and I'm going to use the blending brushes and the blending foam so you have an idea of how that could look. Let's look at that. And this is starting to even out a lot, but if I want, I can still come in and try not to go over the border, but blend it out over here a little bit. So I can use this panel as is on my card, or I can just trim the sides off and use that. Okay, so now I'm going to ink blend the mixed media paper, and I will do exactly the same thing, however with a bit of a twist. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use this stencil and I'm going to ink blend over the stencil, and this is something that you might want to try out at some point because this really creates fun patterns for your card backgrounds, etc. And so this one is from Altenew. It's called Deco Wallpaper, and this is the one I'm going to use for this panel with the mixed media. I'm just going to secure it with my magnets, and what you can do is you can, like I've taped down the card base. It has a uniform border, white border, and this too you can tape it down. So maybe I can use some, you can use some washi tape or something, but I already have them secured. I have the stencil secured, so I shouldn't have a problem. So let's get started, and I'll do the same thing that I did with the other panel. You might want to, if it's an intricate stencil, you might want to hold it down really well, like this one is lifting. There are something called paper pouncers that you can use with intricate stencils, but I am just going to use my, oh actually, you know what, And since this is the first time I'm going to use this, this needs to be well saturated. But this red is pretty intense, so it immediately lays down quite a bit of color. Like before, I'm going to come in from the top first before I blend it into the red to avoid too much contamination, and it's going to give my red a little time to dry. I'm coming in really light and then going a little bit heavier. Other thing I will do though is I'm going to wipe off my stencil so that my blender, foam blender, doesn't get completely orange. This color isn't the same as this one. I'll show you what I do. Normally I keep these strips of paper handy, you know, I mean, actually I was swatching inks over here, but what I do is for each of the color families, sometimes I'll have a strip of paper and I'm just going to just blend it like that, because again, you know that I've mentioned already that I'm a pretty frugal crafter, and see, this one creates a nice colored cardstock. So if I ever need like a blue, I can always use this strip, and you see I'm getting a nice blue, and that's also helping me get the ink off of the foam blender, right? So this is a nice way to just get the ink off. Yeah, it takes a few extra minutes. Oops, it takes a few extra minutes, but that's fine because I can use this for sentiment stamps, for, you know, creating die cuts and things like that. That's it, and I think this is good enough, and I can go ahead and use this. Just going back over with the yellow to make sure the blend is nice and smooth. Okay. All right. Next one is purple, and maybe I should demonstrate the brush because the brush can be a little bit tricky. And here's my purple. Doesn't look like there's a lot of ink on this one. Now, challenge with the brush is that because it picks up the ink on the top portion of the bristles, if you go in, it can create a splotch. So this one, again, I will try and ink up this portion, and then I'm going to go in very lightly, or I can tap off the excess over here, go in very lightly like I always do, but I'll be even more careful with the brush. The only thing with the stencil is that if I peel it off now, but I do find that I'm not too happy with the ink blending. It's going to be very difficult for me to place it back in the exact same spot and then ink blend all over again. So I want to make sure that I am indeed happy with the blending. And yeah, it's going to settle. I can still see it's not very smooth here, but I know it's going to settle. Here you go. Look at that. It looks beautiful. Remember one thing, when you're peeling off the tape, always peel it up at an angle, because it might it might really tear the paper otherwise. So be very careful and just peel it up at an angle. It's a gorgeous design, right? It looks really good. And look at how smooth this looks now. And once this dries completely, it's also going to smooth out quite a bit. Okay, so let's look at the samples that I created. So this is the vellum. Now, a few things to note, and I don't know if you can see this. I accidentally touched the vellum while the ink was still wet, and I have smudges all over. Moral of the story is that you need to be very careful when you are ink blending on vellum, because the ink stays wet a lot longer, and also because the Sharpie that I used to write these labels is alcohol, and it reacted with the ink. But look at this. It's so pretty. It's so beautifully subtle. Honestly, this is the best blend, I would say. Like, you can barely see the transitions except where I kind of smudged the thing, but this portion is just to die for. This is beautiful. You can put this on white card base and it would make such a pretty card, right? This would be beautiful. Next is the watercolor paper, and you can tell that it is really grainy. It's so uneven. I did use the smoother side, but despite that, it's very, very grainy, and it doesn't, it doesn't blend. The ink doesn't blend too well on this. Next one is the Bristol, and I have to tell you something. I learned something while I was doing this video for you, and I did say that Bristol is the best paper for ink blending, but I'm sorry, I have to apologize and say I lied. I'll tell you why. Because I used to use ink blend on Bristol when I needed to, like entire card panels, the large ones, but I had not tried Nina Solar, because I used to use Nina Solar only for the card base. I never blended with it, but now I realize that Bristol isn't actually the best. If I can hold it up next to the Nina Solar White crest, you know what I'm talking about. But look at the transitions here, but you can still see some, like tooth and texture over here. It hasn't blended that well. I thought maybe I'd blended on the wrong side, so I did the reverse side as well. Of course, I did it at an angle. This seems a little bit better, but I stand corrected, and I do think that even though a lot of YouTubers say that Bristol is the best paper for blending, but I really honestly think it's not. So this is something I learned while doing this, and it's fantastic. I always say practice makes perfect, and I'm still practicing and trying to perfect my art. So this one is Nina Solar, and this one is Bristol. And of course, you have already seen this, but this is the Hammermill card, and I'm going to use this for a card and mixed media as well. The mixed media too, it kind of evened out quite a bit, although you do see some texture here, but it's evened out quite a bit. So I think that smooth cardstock is indeed the way to go. So it is the Hammermill and the Nina Solar White crest that basically win this challenge. Now let me show you a couple of other little samples I was creating while practicing. So same thing, I didn't learn my lesson. The ink smudged, right? And if I just put this, it's just shades of blue, right? And look at the beautiful blend, except of course, please ignore the smudges from my fingers. And yes, and this one is the Neener Solar again. And look at the blend on this. Absolutely stunning. And of course, I love the color combination. That's another thing. But I think it really matters. The paper really matters. And I hope you can see that. There's just one other thing I want to show you. And that is, because these were dye inks, these are water-based inks, they do react to water. So what I'm going to do is I have a little water over here in my sprayer. I'm going to take a little bit in my hands and I'm just going to sprinkle, right? You can create big drops, small drops, whatever. And then I'm going to just take a tissue and you see it's already reacting with the water. And I'm going to take a tissue and I'm going to just soak it up. So this technique is called lifting. And you see, unfortunately, I didn't make really nice drops here. So maybe a few on this side, too large. Normally, if I'm not doing this on camera, I would do a better job. But you know what I mean. You get the drift. So just lift it up and I don't like this. But anyway, so I'm going to have to do something about this. And also remember, the problem here is also that I'm using the hammer mill. So I shouldn't have put such a big droplet, couple of these big droplets, because hammer mill is not the best paper for moisture. So it was a mistake. I should have done a better job. But okay, so while we are at it, maybe we can let's try the Neener. Let's try the Neener. This time I think I'm going to do something else. I will take a paintbrush and I'm just going to splatter some water droplets. I think this is a much better idea. Okay, so just let it react for a second and I'm going to just lift it up and let's see how that looks. Not too visible, but I would probably give it a little more time or a few more splatters. Maybe a few bigger splatters. Because this is a thicker cardstock, so it should not buckle under the moisture. Yeah, better. But as it dries, it's going to be a little bit more visible. So definitely this is a way to create some texture on the background. Texture meaning visual texture. You don't really have not real physical texture, but visual texture. This would have been nice if I didn't mess this up over here. So now I will have to either be really clever and cover this bit up with something, with a big stamp or something like that, or I have to discard this paper. We'll see what I do with it finally. So let's move to the next part. I did the last batch of ink blending with dye inks. I thought it might be a good idea to show you what oxides look like, because oxides are honestly the best inks for ink blending. I thought that it would be important to show you both the dye as well as the oxides and look at the differences maybe. So I have these paper panels, And what I'm going to do is, instead of trying to switch out my blender foam each time, I'm going to start with red, apply the red across all the panels, and then yellow and blue and purple. So let's start with this is the Nina Solar White. I had not ink blended on Nina Solar White like I mentioned, so I thought that it would be important to show you the oxides on this as well, because honestly I think it's going to be a huge game changer for me as well, because I used to only ink blend on Hammermill or mixed media. So let's start with the red, and I'm going to use a dome blender for all of these, because with the dome there are less chances of being splotchy. So I'm going to start off like really light and then go into heavy-handed blending. And you can already see that it's so much smoother. And remember, as the ink dries, it's going to get even smoother. This is the Nina. The watercolor actually blended pretty well. This is the Hammermill. Last but not least, the vellum. And I'm going to wipe this off. Since it's translucent, any ink that touches even the reverse side will create like a shadow, and I don't want that. And this time I have to be really mindful of not smudging it. Let's go back to the Nina. Okay, so here is something I am going to do. I'm going to just take a post-it note, and all I'll do is just stick my finger into the sticky band and just hold it here so that I don't accidentally get fingerprints and smudges if the ink is wet. And that way my fingers don't get inky either. Let's evaluate the results. I'm actually not going to touch any of these panels right now, maybe from here. All right, so let's look at the results. I do see a little bit of splotchiness here. This is the Nina. It's blended pretty well, right? This one too. This is the watercolor. It's blended really well. Remember that this is a little bit more heavier ink than the dye ink, so it sits around a little bit longer and that creates the better blends. This one too, pretty good. This is the mixed media. This is mixed media paper. This one is hammer mill and it's blended beautifully. And this is the one that I usually use for blending. This and oxide inks. Most of the time when I'm blending, I use oxide, but sometimes I do use dye inks as well for blending. And the vellum turned out so perfect, right? So if I can bring the other panels, this was the one which was, I dropped a whole lot of water. It's dried out and it's created like this blob over here, which I don't like, but I'm going to cover this up when I make a card. This one was with the stencil. This one, of course, was the vellum with all my fingerprints on it. I can easily get identified and booked through my fingerprints on this vellum. This one was the Bristol. By the way, I did not blend the Bristol cardstock. I just realized I didn't blend with the oxides, but it doesn't matter. It's going to be pretty much close to like the Nina or the watercolor even. So this was the Bristol, which didn't turn out so well. If you remember, I was wondering if I'd blended the wrong side, and then I blended the other side, the reverse side, and I still see some graininess here, right? This is better, but I do see some graininess here. Then and remember, I also sprinkled some water to show you the water reactiveness. So this one was the Nina. This one was the Nina. Sorry, did I say, what did I say was the other one? Yeah, this is the Bristol, this is the Nina, and this is the watercolor. These are the results. These are the oxides, and these are the dye inks. You've seen all the different samples over here, and all I can tell you is that practice makes perfect. Don't get discouraged. Look at like the varied results I have. If you keep experimenting, you will understand how inks interact on different papers, different inks on different papers. And also remember, protect your work surface, because you see, you don't want to contaminate either your ink pads or your blends. The other thing is that if you are, which I haven't showed here because I didn't need to, is if you are planning to get things done in a hurry, you don't have a lot of time to let these air dry, definitely use a heat tool. You can use a hair dryer if you don't have a heat tool, and that can speed up the drying process, which means that you know, between the different layers of blending, because that will mean that you have less smudges like me, criminal right here, guilty as charged, and you won't kind of mess up your ink blended panels, because ink blending does take a bit of effort and a lot of ink, so you don't want that to go to waste. So if you follow these tips, you'll be well on your way to creating beautiful cards. And I'm telling you, keep practicing. Whether you're making a birthday card, whether you're making a thank you note, or just sending a little hello to a friend or a loved one, ink blending is something that will take your card making skills to the next level, and it's going to add a touch of magic. Believe me. Of course, I've tried to show you, I've tried to demonstrate that you can own just a few inks and create these varied colors. Look at the different color variations between each of these blends. So that's what I wanted to show you. But also remember, I showed you these two panels, and obviously, if you select a color family and you keep it kind of within the same color family, the effect is totally different, right? And look at how beautiful this one is as well. And if I place it on a white surface, that the colors really pop. I hope you enjoyed watching me ink blend the boring 4 colors, but I'm sure you picked up something from it, and I hope you'll practice that and have fun. Hop on over to the next video where I'll be showing you how I used a couple of these panels to make 2 cards, and I hope to see you in the next one.